Nigeria today has built a strong, enduring foundation and secured future for its teeming youths across the country by taking strategic initiatives to promote the physical, mental, and socio-economic development of the Nigerian youth, not only through the advancement and protection of their rights, but also through sports. A combination of youth and sports, you will agree with me, are surely the greatest components of nation building. No wonder they feature prominently in a strategic federal ministry, talking about the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports. But the critical questions that readily comes to mind and demands answers are: to what extent has the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports actualized its mandate and set objectives to meet up with the aspirations and expectations of Nigerians in general and the youths in particular? What are the giant strides recorded in the field of sports and youth development under the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration? Let's verify and ascertain the facts and figures from the man at the ends of affairs of the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports, Chief Sunday Dare, who of course has exhibited quality leadership of the ministry as the minister. On our Talking with the Minister segment on the Minister's platform on TV Nigeria. Honorable Minister, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
For record purpose, what is actually the strategic master plan of this ministry, and to what extent has this master plan been achieved?
Well, let me first put this out there on record that hitherto we had two different ministries, the Youth Ministry and the Sports Ministry. And when President Muhammadu Buhari came in 2015, decided to merge youth and sports. And that is in line with what you see across the African continent and even beyond, where youth and sports, and in some cases, culture are merged together. Having said that, the strategic plan for youth and sports are contained in two different documents. The one for youth is the National Youth Policy, which took several years to put together. It's reviewed every year, and the very core of that document speaks to 13 thematic areas in which the youth must be engaged in order to have the kind of development you expect. At least 10 of those thematic areas are benchmarked with what you see across the world, but also with the United Nations when it comes to youth development. A few of these thematic areas, it speaks to youth and sports, interestingly, youth and education, youth and health, youth and ICT, youth and social vices in terms of drug abuse and the rest. And it just goes. That document expects that our programming, our initiatives, our projects are aimed at taking care of these issues in terms of engagement. Some of it has empowerment components, some of it has investment component, some of them have training component. But I think the overriding connector has been that in a digital age, whatever you do when it comes to these thematic areas must see technology as an enabler. And that has dominated what we have done. And I'm sure we're going to get to that at some point. When it comes to sports development, we've had about 2 or 3 national sports development policies. Even from our mandate, is very clear. At the core of our mandate is grassroots sports development. It has to do with well-being and building a healthy citizen. It's not just about competition, but also it's about our sports was before designed as mere recreation, as a service. You know, government just is not a business, never a business. And that's how we met it when we came. We had the sports policy, sports as recreation. We were challenged to make sure that Nigeria competes and we win laurels for our country. But I can tell you 4 years down the road, we've been able to shake the table, tweak around, look at the policies, make them more dynamic and relevant to the current realities, but also make sure that they connect and they resonate with the aspirations of the youth. So those are the two documents, but we've tampered with them. to make them effective.
Since you came on board as the Federal Minister of Youth and Sport Development, there's actually been quite some level of proactiveness, dynamism, and of course, very impressive progress so far. But, Honorable Minister, please, can you tell us, your ministry has articulated several relevant programs of action for youth and sports development. Can you highlight these initiatives so far?
We knew from the onset that we were served the two largest audiences in this country. The sports audience is almost 120 million. Nigerians that love sports, whether it's football, basketball. Then you come to the youth. The youth audience, the population, the bulge, you're looking at 95 to 100 million. Two of the largest audiences you have in our country, very sensitive. Most of them are also in this group, they want results. So our overriding concern was to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel, but not to be afraid to jettison a model that's not working and coming up with a model that works. Above all, to benchmark whatever we do with what occurs in other climes. Because in the 21st century, and with technology as an enabler, no country has any excuse any longer, because you can acquire technology, you can train your people, you can bring experts to do what you want. So in sports, what did we do? We started clearly to try to tinker with the national sports policy. We said across the world, most successful nations in sports is business, it's not recreation. There's a recreational aspect of it, but government engages sports as business. So we developed a business model around our sports, and we wrote a completely new sports policy, which we call the National Nigerian Sports Industry Policy, that had at its heart the three triggers that can turn sports into business. First, the president reclassified sports from recreation to business. And then we had to follow up with a policy, which we delivered last year, with three triggers. For sports to be business, you need incentives, you need infrastructure, and then you need investment. Those are the three I's that drive sports as a business. We delivered that. We're in the process of making sure that the incentives approved by the federal government are properly coded and put together, and then we can leverage private funding into sports development. But beyond that, we developed an athlete welfare package under the Adopt initiative, where we have the Adopt an Athlete. And we made sure that we pitched our athletes to subnational government, private companies that got home-based athletes $10,000, foreign-based $20,000 to help. The greatest challenge of our athletes is not just the equipment or facilities to train, but also they need grants. Even in the UK and the US, athletes get grants, not in this country. So we changed that narrative by developing a public-private model under the Adopt an Athlete policy. And you saw the resultant effect of that. We went to Olympics, we won two medals, the best performance in 13 years. Then we went to the World Athletics, and we produced the first world champion for this country, ever. And then we went to the Commonwealth and produced the best record ever in the history of the Commonwealth for this country. Amongst the entire African countries that came, we came first. Overall, in the Commonwealth nations, we came seventh. So these monies went directly, and we've developed in the new policy an independent athletes welfare fund that will provide grants and scholarship to support our athletes. They need money for scholarship. They need money for nutrition. They need money for their doctors. This funding they need is critical, and we've captured it. And quite a number of things. In sports, you look at three I's. Infrastructure is critical. What has happened to our infrastructure? From the Moshood Abiola Stadium, Abuja Stadium, 9 years. The pitch had become a farm. Corn was growing on the pitch. We have the pictures. National Stadium, Surulere, Obafemi Awolowo Stadium, all abandoned. Some for 9 years, some for 19 years, some for 20 years. So we developed what we call Adopt a Pitch initiative. We approached Dangote Industries. That stadium now has been certified by FIFA and CAF. We've played more than 14 international matches. The CAF team came to also inspect it. The National Stadium, Surulere, is coming back gradually. The Premier Lotto Group, the pitch has been rebuilt. Digital scoreboards have come in. They're doing the tartan track. At least the first phase of bringing back that stadium. And what did we do? We also make sure that we took down 180 illegal structures within and outside the stadium. We pulled them down, cleared it up, returned the stadium to its original architectural design. But then we're still challenged by paucity of funds. So what we've done is try to address those three critical areas: infrastructure, incentives, particularly by government, and then investment. Government now, under the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025, for the very first time, sports had a seat at the table. The sports is going to get 80 billion in the next 4 years to develop sports in this country. And that's the future. When it comes to youth, I must say something about youth, because we also provided and developed a very far-reaching document. The Nigerian Youth Investment Fund is called the NYIF. It's a 75 billion naira investment fund approved by Mr. President. 25 billion naira per year. 2020, 21, 22, and 23. 25 billion per year. And that fund speaks directly to the fact that we need to move from merely empowering our youth to investing in their future. You see, when you empower, it's like pocket money. It freezes out. But when you invest in somebody's ideas, you put him on the path of entrepreneurship, becomes a creator of wealth, employer of labor, and then ultimately contributes to GDP of a country. And we've been giving between 250 and 3 million naira to our youth. So far, about 25 to 30,000 have benefited, with another 100,000 in the pipeline. We've only drawn just 10% of that entire 75 billion. And then digital training is key. We aim to train our youth, give them training in digital skills. 500,000 is the target. We're now at 320,000 that have been trained in about 14 different digital skills, and that's ongoing. Of course, we're challenged by scale because you have millions waiting. We've only done 320,000, but at least we're on the right path.
There are key fundamental issues when it has to do with sports development globally in any country. And we've observed that you've actually made a very significant effort in this regard. We would like you to share your experience with us. We're talking about identifying, exploring, and scouting for potential talents across the country. Can we share the policy trust for this area?
I think the starting point has to do with the national sports policy. There are 4 core areas, but one of the topmost one has to do with grassroots sports development. You see, when it comes to sports administration and sports development, without grassroots sports development, it's bottom up. You cannot have the podium performances. You cannot have global performances. Your athletes cannot be on the global stage, not even on the continental stage, because you must find these talents. They're not just in the urban areas. They're there in the grassroots, in the rural areas. You must go down. But also develop grassroots sports. And it starts from the inter-school sports, from the primary to the secondary, and up to the elite club where you have. What we had before was not sports development in Nigeria. Okay. We just had episodal funding of sports competitions. Once there's Commonwealth, you're provided funds for the Commonwealth. After Commonwealth is over, you go, everybody goes home. Then there's Olympics, 4 years. Another fund comes. There's All African Games. That's not sports development. You're just funding competitions, because then you now run around. But what have we done to change this? First, we returned back to the very letter of that national sports policy. And we said we're going to emphasize grassroots sports development. Without competition, you can also discover talent. So we made sure that the National Youth Games continued unbroken. We returned it to 1 year instead of every 2 years. The National Youth Festival, after a 6-year hiatus, came back. We've had about 2 or 3 National Sports Festival. But also, more importantly, we developed a talent hunt program. That is, we mandated every federation to find these talents and then take them on and then nurture them. As a ministry, we also had a team led by Mary Oyale, looking for these young ones from age 8 up. And we've had success. We had about 11 of them. We have the Yakubu sisters. We had the young swimmer who is the fish. He's won so many international talents. We have the young boxer, Safinat, who is now 12 years old or 13. She's terrific. And the list goes on. This is what I often say, and it's true when it comes to sports. The gold is in the child. That is, that adult that you see today getting the gold, the silver, the bronze, at Olympics, it started when the child was a child, when he was a kid. And then you started training the child through primary school, secondary school sports competition. So the gold is in the child. So unless we return to that, and that's the effort we've tried to work with the Ministry of Education to return competitive sports, inter-school sports. We also did something novel. For 25 years, the Principal's Cup was jettisoned. When you look at the West Hove years, the Bonfrey Joe years, the Stephen Keshi years, when we had terrific footballers in this country, 80% of them came from the Principal's Cup, the secondary school football competition. And for 25 years, we jettisoned it. Last year, we brought it back. We're running the second edition. And football stars are coming. The Amokatis of this were JJ Okocha, Okoro Wantan. They were found in the Principal's Cup. So that was confined mostly to the Southwest. Now, it's now the National Principal's Cup. As I speak, we've just finished the first round. The zonal ones will come. We had about 20,000 schools, 21,000 schools participate in the Principal's Cup. These schools are in local government areas. That is grassroots. You play bottom up. You pick the talented ones and you take them up. So it's a, sports development is a culture. It's not a knee-jerk reaction. You don't throw money at it. It doesn't come in 2 months. It's a culture that you nurture over time, and it must be through a developmental policy.
It's still the minister's platform, and of course we've been speaking with the Federal Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports, Chief Sunday Dare, giving us a very clear picture of the major giant strides of the ministry under his able leadership. So, Honorable Minister, there is what you call the politics of sports, and when you talk about sports administration, there is no how you can actually run away from the politics of sports. We've seen different sports boards reconstituted. Some of them, of course, are facing certain challenges. But we wanted to give us, how were you able to, maybe you need to cite certain examples, looking at administering effectively the politics of sports across board, the various sports associations in the country?
Well, that's an interesting question because when you have to manage 38 different national sport federations that we have in the country, they're called NSFs, you know that you will have to deal with a number of challenges and a number of situations that might not be too pleasant. The fact that these boards have elected board members, they have a president and then they have board members. And I dare say, when I took over, it was good that they had been constituted. They had a code of governance and the boards were working. But also, as you will expect normally in a human setting, certain boards were not functioning optimally. Certain presidents within their constitution had extraordinary powers that, when exercised fully, hurt the interest of sports development in Nigeria. We also had issues with lack of unity with the federations of certain boards. But by and large, we had a very stable relationship. The push for me was that we have a relationship that was collaborative, where both sides, both government and these federations, who draw their legitimacy anyway from the government. And those that hold those positions in trust, whether as presidents or board members, we're holding them in public trust because of the legitimacy they draw from government. But we always come upon this difficult challenge where you have the international sporting bodies saying that the government cannot interfere, the government is a third party. And then you have people who now replace their own parochial personal interest with, they jettison the national interest and bring on their parochial interest and then robe it in interference. And we drew the line. I drew the line. There's interference and there's intervention. The government will not sit by for you to destroy the sporting fortunes of a particular sport simply because you think the international body will protect you. So we insisted that we can intervene to prevent a crisis, which is what we did. We did that with the AFN. It took us 2 years to sort it out, and we did sort it out. We did that with the basketball. They had almost 8-9 years of crisis. We had 7 meetings. We begged, we spoke to people. People will not budge. We had people basically defaming the character of the federal government, and there were just lies out there. So after all else failed, we pulled the trigger. We said for 2 years, Nigeria will not compete in international basketball competition. Our youth basketball league died for 4 years because there were cases in court. But eventually reason prevailed. The leadership of the basketball worked with the ministry. Normalcy returned eventually. The president approved that barely after 4 months, we returned back to basketball. Those are just two examples because it's a process. And what we've tried to establish is to protect the sovereignty of our country, to protect the mandate of the Ministry of Youth and Sports. You can't take resources from us in millions and millions of dollars and naira. You sing under our national anthem. You wear our national colors. You speak Nigerian. You compete for a country. And you say that country cannot tell you what to do when you're going wrong. We've tried to push that envelope to say, no, there's a line. No matter how thin it is, it exists. The Ministry of Youth and Sports has the mandate constitutionally to set the general direction for sports policy. And that includes the Code of Governance. The Code of Governance is our code that guides relationship. And we've tried to make sure that they follow through with it. But by and large, we have seen a more collaborative effort amongst our sporting federations and the ministry. We've tried to push the need for responsible leadership. We've tried to also ask some of them to review their constitutions, where you feel that the powers that the president has is total and my hot development of the sports. So it's an open thing, it's progressive, but then we've been able to put down clear markers.
Honorable Minister, maybe you also need to share with us what is the level of synergy and collaboration between the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports and the state government. From research, we found out that there was quite some level of vibrancy when it has to do with synergy with the state government. And so, what's the story like, really?
Well, I think that has been sustained, but not to the level, not the kind of momentum you want to see. Because first, we needed to get all the sub-national governments to key into the national sports policy.
Were they supportive, really?
They were. At least the times we've reached out to them when it had to do. When it comes to the National Sports Festival, we see virtually every state attend. The one we did in Asaba Delta had over 14,000 athletes from 36 states and Abuja. The one we did in Edo, though it was delayed because of COVID, the number was reduced because of COVID too. We had over 9,000. We've had the National Youth Games in Ilorin last year, Kwara State. They turned up by sending their contingents. It shows that even at the state levels, they were also developing sports at the grassroots. So we've had that support. But the point we are now is at the new policy that we have now, it's important to get the full buy-in of all the governors. And I think as soon as it was approved, we did send copies to the states. Part of what we'll do on the road is to meet with all the commissioners of youth and sports, the DG Sports Commission, to really break down what the sports policy is in capsule. Because there are about 15 pages or 10 pages in that document that sets out the role and responsibilities of state governments when it comes to sports development and the kind of support they can get from the federal government. So I will believe that will grow stronger.
For every federal ministry, there is always some form of challenges. Maybe you want to share with us, what are those critical challenges of the ministry under your administration? How were you able to mitigate against them?
Definitely, the challenges, I think the first major challenge I encountered is funding. The budget for sports development was just not it. Was at the barest minimum. Because when I came in, we just had less than 2 billion, 1.9, 1.7 billion for sports development for an entire year for this big country. So you knew that wouldn't do. And then for sports development, we had something within that region. But we've changed that because we just realized, look, we need to have a private sector orientation. And that's why we developed a PPP model. And we applied that to infrastructural regeneration. We applied that to athletes' welfare. We applied that to training and development. It was true trying to leverage private funding into sports that we got money from Dangote to fix the Moshood Abiola Stadium.
But are you getting there quite enough?
We're not getting enough. We're not getting enough. And which is why we never relented in making sure that the sports industry policy was ready. That's why we went as far as making sure that we got sports a seat at the table. When we had the first document on national development, we were not there. But we were able to show cause why sports can be run as business. Having a seat at that table got us 80 billion for the next 4 years to develop sports. It's never happened before. So we decided to make sure that we partner with the private sector. We developed a model that worked. That is now fully coded in the sports industry policy. And we think the better features here. But also, you also see a government under President Muhammadu Buhari that is responsive. First, by reclassifying sports from recreation to business. That's responsiveness. Secondly, by approving the National Sports Industry Policy in November, in line with what obtains in other climes. But also, thirdly, each time we needed intervention funds outside of our budget, there has been no time we approached Mr. President for an intervention fund, whether for the sports festival, the Commonwealth, the All-African Games, the Olympics, that the president has not acceded. So you see a president who is in tune with the developments in sports, but also in support of that new orientation that it must be a joint effort. Public funds and private funds together can make our sports development better.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Well, when it has to do with sports administration, accurate data is quite fundamental. It's not just about running a sport ministry, but as a country, you must have verifiable data to enable you create certain policies and strategies to meet up with your mandate. What is the data information administration or collation of the ministry, and to what extent does this help you in attaining your set objectives?
I think in another 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to be launching our data collection system called SIMS.
Interesting.
It's already fully developed. Next week, I'm going to get the first dry run of it. And it's designed in such a way that it is an aggregator software that allows every state to impute raw data about their athletes, every information, the sports, where they've competed. When that raw data comes into our portal, at the ministry, we have statisticians and others who will now distill this data. They will clean the data up before it goes into the final portal that the entire world can see. The development of SIMS began before I came, but it was stunted completely. So I had to reactivate it. And we're at the point at delivering that. But even before the SIMS comes on board, we've been able to use the technology we have by imputing into the system, into the computer. I will tell you what we did when it came to the Olympics. We decided we're going to do a bit of scientific approach. In the past, we went and competed in 25, 28 different sports. And we said, no, we want to be competitive. When you go to the Olympics, you're not going to just train. You're going to compete to win a medal. So we looked at all our sports. Then we looked at our performance over time in boxing, in wrestling, in basketball, at least the ones we qualified for. And then we saw that it's only in 9 sports or 10 that would be most competitive in about 4 or 5 Olympics. And then we realized, okay, so that means the other 15, 18 sports, we were just going there to just show up. Because the medal range is, there are 3, is 1 to 3. Gold, silver, and bronze. That's the medal range. If you come forward, that's it. So we also looked at any sport in which we don't have an athlete or we're not ranked at least 25th in the world, we will not go. We had sports in which we're at 150 position in the world. That means even if we took that boxer to Olympics, he doesn't stand a chance anywhere of winning a medal. So there was some kind of scientific approach which helped us to just go with 9 sports to the Olympics. And that will continue as we prepare for France 2024. So I'm happy that SIMS will be ready, and we're going to input all of this data, backing up to maybe about 30 years, even for athletes that are retired, athletes that have served this country and are dead, that kind of data. So anywhere in the world, you can just punch in and then be able to get the data that is necessary. We have also developed this, what we call the concept of the High Performance Center. High Performance Center is within the realm of sports medicine. And it speaks to the fact that talent is no longer just enough to get you to win. You have to, as an athlete, get your body and your systems calibrated with precision. That's why countries could guess, they could get data to know that this athlete cannot make it once you go through some equipment at the high performance center. That center also allows you to take care of deficiencies in your talent, in your nutrition and the rest. So we're about getting approval to build a high performance center. All the equipment we need, 90% of the equipment we need to install in that center have been purchased. They are waiting at the Mashood Abiola Stadium. And I think we're entering not just the realm of digital or data sports, but the realm of sports medicine and sports science. And that's the future of sports.
Usage of drugs in sports. We've had doping tests, which of course has also, to some extent, also affected the image of the country. So, Honorable Minister, let's share your experience on how you've been able to create that, level of awareness to, avoid dope tests.
Well, and I think when I came in, the swan song, even from the ministry, was that this country has zero tolerance, and it's a global thing. Yeah, that's what you find. You have WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, that emphasizes clean sports, and the message is strong. As far back as 40 years ago, we've had athletes fall short, taking substances that are banned, whether wittingly or unwittingly. For us in Africa, it's a bigger challenge because certain foods that we eat, the substances that you cannot take as an athlete, I've seen the list. It's over almost 200 substances. And then when you look at the level of education of some of the athletes, it does not rise up to the consciousness they need to know that before I take this herb from my mother in the village, somebody needs to check what the components are. But that's no excuse because there's a zero tolerance. And I think the greatest weapon against substance abuse or substance use in sports is awareness. That's the greatest weapon.
So what have you done in this regard?
So through our NADC, working with WADA, they've held several trainings. We have a board that deals with that. The training is offline and online. For every sporting competition we have the team from WADA and NADC providing literature and the rest of them. But beyond that, we've also made sure that we ramped up our testing. Because when athletes know that they will be tested randomly, they won't even know. You just get a knock on your door, and then bam, your sample is taken. We've ramped up. We ramped up from, like 25% that we had to almost 85%. And we got a commendation from the AU. But, we've had in the recent, very recently, we've had some not too good experiences. But when you look at it, it's just very minor. But then that process is ongoing to create awareness, to make sure that the sanctions that come with it are clearly spelled out so that the athletes know the consequences. When we went to the Olympics, the president said, I don't want a sold medal, I want clean medals. And that's it. Almost every country battles with this, but you just keep at it. You talk to our athletes, you give them the support they need, the training they need, and then they can give you the best.
Okay, Honorable Minister, a very critical question I'm about to ask you. This, of course, is more like observations by sports analysts and sports experts. Nigeria as a country, we've got fantastic talents cut across the globe. Some that you don't even know. But we just hear them winning laurels for the country. So, Honorable Minister, is there a monitoring mechanism by the ministry to try to ensure that most of these potentials cut across the globe, you're able to bring them under the umbrella?
There is. Is it when you look at national sports federations that we have, they're quasi-independent, and part of their mandate, the Badminton Federation, for instance, has a responsibility to monitor and locate badminton players in Nigeria and abroad and bring them into their database, such that when we want to go for competitions, we tell the badminton, give us the best Nigerians that can compete in the area of badminton for our country. That's where the federations come in. The ministry, if we cite such, we just let the federation know, oh, there's a Nigerian sports person in this country, and you need to get the person. Now, when we also go for the Olympics, for instance, we know we have what we call national trials. The national trials is a call-out order to all Nigerian athletes. Are you a Nigerian athlete in South Africa, in the US, wherever in the world? We're holding a national trial between the 10th and the 14th. Show up. So it's a level playing ground. So if you're a Nigerian, you're interested in competing for the country, you fly down and compete. And right there, if you are the best, you get to be part of the Nigerian team. And that's the way it's been. And we've seen people, some of the best. Toby Amuson came for every single national trial. And she won. Ese Brume came. Blessing. Every athlete, we make it mandatory. You don't show up for our national trial, you can't wear our colors. Because we want to give everybody a chance. We won't just assume you're the best. And I think that's an approach that has worked over time. When we find talents in football, the NFF also has a responsibility to go after that talent, to see whether, oh, can you play for Nigeria? And then the coaches will do the screening, and that's it. And I think that's the way it's been done everywhere. With regards to youth development, we've also seen under the President Muhammadu Buhari government a deliberate effort to make sure that the investment in our youth is ratcheted up. I speak about a government that has had at least 45 different youth programs, domiciling about 7 or 8 ministries and 14 parastatals in the last 8 years. That's huge. But for me, in 4 years, we've seen some very far-reaching decisions taken in favor of youth development. First, we've seen that paradigm shift from youth empowerment to youth development, moving away from just giving them stipends to investing in their ideas, their innovative minds, their skills. And I think that's major. We've seen a lot of resources going to digital skills training for our youth in the 21st century, not just on the part of our ministry. When you look at collectively what my ministry, Youth and Sports, the Ministry of Communication, Digital Economy, Humanitarian, and a couple of other ministries have done when it comes to digital training, it's in the millions over time. That's investment in the future of our youth, which starts now. Then you talk about the Youth Investment Fund, the very first of its kind, created for our youth. This government is also thinking of creating Youth Entrepreneurship Bank. Recently we had a meeting with the AFDB in which they want Nigeria to be part of that. That's the new frontier for youth investment, where you're going to have, specially designed Youth Entrepreneurship Bank for our youth. It's been proven globally that no country has ever been able to bring down youth unemployment without deliberately placing the mass of its youth on the part of entrepreneurship. And when you talk about entrepreneurship, you talk about availability of funds, access to funds on the part of the youth, and also some level of management, business management training. All of that come together. So we're seeing funds coming together, not just from government, but also from the private sector, with the AFDB leading in that direction. And we think that will change the narrative for our youth. But lastly, I am a firm believer that the youth of this country are not a problem, but they're a resource for our country. It's already been said repeatedly that in the next 10 to 15 years, the greatest resource of Nigeria will no longer be oil, but is youth. And when you look at it, at the cutting edge of technology, you find our youth. At the vanguard of creatives and entertainment, you find our youth. The dominance we get in sports right now is our youth between 18 and 32. It's our youth. 65% of our youth are engaged in sports. So at the critical sectors of the economy, and then the digital age, the champions of the digital age are the youth. And unless a country continues to increase its investment in its youth, then its future is imperiled. And that's a present challenge that every country faces. And I think that Nigeria is engaging in all fronts when it comes to youth development. iDice was just launched recently, 3 weeks ago. So when you look at it, whether from the public sector, the private sector, you see concerted efforts to make sure that, funds flow to our youth training. The idea is that you create open doors and windows of opportunities for our youth, and then you see what they can do. Unless you give someone an opportunity to fly, that is not going to happen.
Honourable Minister, as a sports administrator, how would you analyze, describe the psychological mental state of the average Nigerian youth?
Let me answer that very brutally. I think it's wrong to want to use the same brush to paint everyone. It's a question of quantum. If you have 90 million youths and you have even 1 million that are lazy and unserious, it's going to be difficult for you to just, in absolute terms, say in far from that the other 80 million are also lazy and unserious. I don't think Nigerian youths are lazy in terms of when you look at the percentage. I think the larger percentage of them. And when you look at every age group, you find that someone who is 50 years today also passed through the age, the youth age. And there are certain things they did. Some of us also went to school. We went to school barefooted. We went to school without riding a bus. We went to school, we sat on hardwood, no AC, no fan. There are days we went to school, we didn't have money. We went to secondary schools, boarding schools. Our allowances finished 10 days out of 30 days. And then we have to just manage. We went to school without enjoying certain privileges. But we kept at it because that's a rite of passage. So I have a problem when you have certain youth who think that there's a leap. Once you finish, it's automatic, you get the good life. It's not automatic. But I also know that opportunities are getting tighter. But also when you deal with the number of our youth who are coming out of secondary school, who are being trained, who end up without having a job, a means of livelihood, that starts to really bother you. And I think that government is making efforts. We need the private sector to do more. So when you talk about the youth, I would characterize the youth of this country as hugely talented, can be a little bit impatient, but also they have a boundless capacity to do good because of the digital age in which we are. And the earlier we tap into these skills, we have to develop these skills, and then we scale up the number of our youth we give opportunities, the better for our country.
The present administration is going to be wrapping up by May 29. And of course, to a large extent, the President Muhammadu Buhari-led government, based on some of the verifiable facts and information you've given here, have actually made significant giant strides in the field of sports and youth development. So, Honorable Minister, what are those legacies we can say that this administration is leaving behind under your able leadership as the federal minister?
We have policies, we've had initiatives and projects. When you look at what has been done when it comes to sports development, there's a legacy there. We have a reorientation when it comes to sports. From the point of moving away from just periodic funding of competitions, we've returned to the very culture of sports development. That is an all-round 360, and the components of that are there for you to see. As we speak, our preparations for the Olympics is ongoing. So that general reorientation. Within that circle is also turning sports into business from recreation. It's never done before. Within that also is the policy, the sports industry policy that has been approved, where you're going to have a bouquet of incentives for the private sector to invest in sports. Where sports is now business, you can invest in sports. Where sports now will be audited like other sectors of the economy. And then we can see, oh, sports, is it $1 billion it has brought for this country? And it opens door not just for Nigerian investors, but also for foreign investors, because they know there's a law and there's a policy that drives sports. So those are legacies. But also you look at our performances, particularly that of the Commonwealth performance, that of the World Championship, now with the record of the first world champion in athletics for Nigeria. The most important, however, is also the legacy of trying to bring back our sporting infrastructure.
Honorable Minister, I want to thank you for coming on the Minister's platform, Chief Sunday Dare. But on a final note, sir, what's your word of encouragement, assurance to Nigerians and, of course, the stakeholders?
We have been able to put down clear markers for youth and sports development. We've been able to put on the table certain policies and initiatives. if they are followed through, will brighten the future of youth and sports development. We've been able to, as a ministry, try to move our ministry to a top-tier ministry because we've been able to attract the necessary attention and funding needed for sports and youth development. As we speak, for the first time, the National Development Plan has 80 billion naira for sports in 4 years and 60 billion naira for youth development. That's a quantum of 120 billion. Never happened before. We still have close to 60 billion naira left for the National Youth Investment Fund, which is going to roll over. Never happened before under this very administration. But in its totality, you know, governance is a continuum. We believe that, having set down these clear markers, we believe that if government continues in this orientation, in this trajectory, we'll see better days in sports development, and then we're going to see a scale up in the number of our youths who benefit from government policies, ultimately.
Federal Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports, Chief Sunny Dare, thank you, sir, for granting us this audience. I think it's been quite expository, really, sharing with you your experience so far, and want to wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with the Federal Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports, Chief Sunny Dare. He's been able to catalog and encapsulate the major giant strides and significant success stories of the ministry under his administration. Well, that's it on the minister's platform.